It's already on record. So I do want to point out in the prayer list that Fox News last night, I think, had a Nigerian person on there that had been captured and then he escaped being murdered. And so he was talking, but I had seen it online and looked it up, and that's where I got all that information about the Nigerian persecution being the largest in the world, quite frankly, and I thought it was kind of interesting, and we should be praying for them, as well as everyone around the world that's being persecuted, and we know they are.
Excuse me, but I found it.
Oh, you found it? Okay, good.
I got a Kleenex out of my purse.
There it was.
Thank you very much.
And in your bulletins, you should have 1 Samuel 8, and you've got some of the verses of the story. And it starts in verse 4. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, "Look, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations." But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, "Give us a king." So Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, "Heed the voice of the people in all that they say to you. For they have not rejected you, they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them, according to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them up out of Egypt, even to this day, with which they have forsaken me and served other little g gods. So they are doing to you also. Now therefore heed their voice. However, you shall solemnly forewarn them and show them the behavior of the king who will reign over them." So Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who asked him for a king. And he said, "This will be the behavior of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for his own chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some will run before his chariots. He will appoint captains over his thousands and captains over his 50s. Will set some to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and some to make his weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, and bakers. And he will take the best of your fields, your vineyards, and your olive groves, and give them to his servants. He will take 1/10 of your grain and your vintage, and give it to his officers and servants. And he will take your male servants, your female servants, your finest young men, and your donkeys, and put them to his work. He will take 1/10 of your sheep, and you will be his servants. And you will cry out that day because of your king whom you have chosen for yourselves. And the Lord will not hear you in that day." Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel. And they said, "No, but we will have a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles." And Samuel heard all the words of the people, and he repeated them in the hearing of the Lord. So the Lord said to Samuel, "Heed their voice and make them a king." And Samuel said to the men of Israel, "Every man go to his city. This will be one of the last times I talk about tithing." I don't often talk about tithing, but I feel as Pete is taking over, we should talk about tithing, and the finances of the church are getting small. In 1 Peter 3, it says, "Those who have obtained like precious faith with us by the righteousness of God, of our God and Savior Jesus Christ, What manner of person ought you to be? In holy conduct and godliness. Be diligent to be found by him in peace, without spot and blameless, he says. And in Proverbs 3, verse 9, it says, honor the Lord with your possessions, and with the first fruits of all your increase. So your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine. And in Malachi 3, bring all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. And try me now in this. So the Lord said all of this. And he said, try me, test me. He says, if I will not open for you the windows of heaven and pour out for you such blessing that there will not be room enough to receive it. You know, there are times that we are tempted to pray for things, and yet we don't stop to think of the outcome. You know, we often pray and we don't know where that leads to. Things that we are praying for. I have always been told that we should never pray for patience because God might just ask us to do that. Might have some patience. And if you believe that, I would tell you that you too show we have to be careful what we ask for. All too often we don't think through the things that we ask for. We ask for things we think we need and we think we want, without thinking through the potential repercussions of such a request. In other words, all too often we think we know best. We know best. That we know better than God. In every case, I would tell you, we are wrong. The Israelites were in that mode also. Enemies were all around them, and they had no clear, visible leader, at least not a military one. They must have felt threatened, and without question, they were very insecure. For those of us who need to feel organized, they looked out at the Philistines, and here they saw organization, and then looked at themselves, and they found themselves scared. What they wanted was to feel safe and secure, and they believed that that would come from having a clear, visible leader. It wasn't that God wasn't doing the job, it was that they wanted something more than a God that they couldn't see. Anytime we as humans feel a need in our lives, our natural reaction is to try to take the matters into our own hands. And that is just what the Israelites wanted to do. They wanted to take circumstances. They wanted to take everything into their own hands. They felt much safer when they looked at the world and saw a real live, breathing human being that was in control. Throughout the history of creation, we humans have looked past God for a worldly answer to solve all of our problems. If we look at the biblical witness, we can see that again and again. Even before we see this story, Adam and Eve, they didn't trust God. Instead, they wanted to be like God. In the story of Abraham and Sarah, Abraham not once but twice, when threatened, he tried to pass Sarah off as his sister instead of his wife. He took matters into his own hands, and as a result, he experienced some pretty disastrous results. Later, after God has led the Israelites out of bondage, when Moses, the recognized leader, isn't there, the people stop trusting in God, and they begin to look with longing back at the leadership of Pharaoh. That's where they're looking for leadership. The same guy who oppressed them. We are always looking for ways to take control of things ourselves. We don't want to let God ever to be in charge. The Israelites wanted and asked for a king. They asked for a king to be placed over them, and Samuel tries to persuade them against this. But they weren't going to listen to him. They wanted what they perceived was safety and security, and they were perfectly willing to sacrifice anything to get what they wanted. They were placing their trust in the things of this world. And, we often want something in life, and we want something more. More than what we can have. It could be power, it could be money, it could be things. It could even be security. It can be order. And it is interesting what we will do or what we will sacrifice in order to get what we want. The Emperor Nero, he searched for happiness in the things of this world. He reveled in earthly possessions and set his heart on each of them. From his splendid throne as the ruler of the Roman Empire, he commanded that gorgeous porches a mile long be built around the palace. The ceiling of his banquet hall was equipped at great expense with hidden showers that lightly sprayed perfume upon all who came to visit him. His crown alone was worth more than $500,000. His mules were shod in silver, and whenever he traveled, 1,000 chariots, they accompanied him. And he refused to wear the same garment twice, no matter how costly or beautiful it may have been. Unmercifully, he was able to pay extravagant sums of money to anyone who could devise new methods of entertaining him. Yet with all his riches and his splendor, he was peevish, gloomy. He was a dissatisfied man. The immense wealth he had amassed, that couldn't satisfy him, placing the importance of his life with the things of the world. He would never find satisfaction, and Nero died at his own hand. No matter how hard we might try, we will never find happiness or satisfaction or safety or security in the things of this world. And the things of this world, they all come with a price. Samuel knew that he warned the Israelites against the course of action they were so determined to follow. And as Samuel saw what the Israelites wanted and they would not listen to his warnings, Samuel consulted with God. And whenever we are faced with a problem that's greater than we can handle, we can find an answer in prayer. We can find answers because God answers prayer. Not knowing what to do, Samuel went to God and asked for help. You see, God is where the Israelites should have looked for what they wanted, and God is where we should look for what we need also. And Jesus said, "Ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door will be opened to you." When we accept this instruction, when we center ourselves on God and the things of God, we can pray with greater boldness. It was a sense of being in the center of God's will that gave the great 16th century Christian reformer Martin Luther his boldness in prayer. In 1540, Luther's friend and his assistant, Frederick Myconius, became sick and was expected to die within a short time. On his bed, he wrote with a trembling hand, as you can, a loving farewell note to Luther. And Luther received the letter and instantly sent back a sharp reply. "I command you in the name of God to live, because I still have need of you in the work of reforming the church. The Lord will never let me hear that you are dead, but will permit you to survive me. For this I am praying, this is my will, and may my will be done, because I seek only to glorify God." I don't know what it just did, but just by touching it. Anyway, here is Martin Luther, and he says, "You're not going to die. I command you not to die. I have God's ear, and God says you're not going to die. In fact, you are going to survive me," he says. Let's see. Man, I don't know what this did. Oh, there we go. I touched this and it went crazy. Let's see. And Martin Luther goes on and said, because I seek only to glorify the name of God. Those words are almost shocking. To us, I seek to fulfill the will of God. Not for myself, but for God. So, Myconius, he had already lost the ability to speak when Luther's letter arrived. And in a short time, he revived. He recovered completely. And he lived 6 more years to survive Luther himself by 2 months. So like Luther, Samuel looked to God for the answers he needed regarding his problems with the Israelites. God answered Samuel's prayer by telling him it was not Samuel who was being rejected, but it was God himself. And that Samuel should listen to the Israelites and grant their request. He should give them a king. In essence, God answered Samuel's prayer and the Israelites' request all at the same time. The Israelites' request was answered despite any stern warnings that Samuel may have given them. And it seemed the more that Samuel warned them, the more determined the Israelites were to have a king to rule them. Samuel prophesied what life would be like with a king. Samuel knew that in generations to come, the Israelites would regret the day they asked for a king, as they lived under the weight of those heavy taxes and more. Everything Samuel had said came to pass. He warned them, and the people wanted a king, despite all of his warnings. And that says to me, we should be careful what we ask for, because we might just get it. We've all heard that saying. If we want to live a life apart from God, we can turn, as the Israelites did, to the things of the world. But if we want to live a life with God, and we ask, we need to be ready for that change also. A life with God is available to all of us. All we have to do is ask. But there is a part of the puzzle that we tend to overlook. That is the call to radical discipleship. It is the part that calls us to turn our backs on the things of the world in order to live lives totally for God. But the good news is that is where we find happiness, satisfaction, comfort, security, and order in our lives. What we are giving up is nothing more than a placebo measure to help us feel good. The Israelites had that, and yet they were unable to see it. You know, there were some wild ducks, and they were journeying northward, when a flock of tame ones came into view, and they were in a barnyard. Leaving his friends in flight, one of the migrants landed and mingled for a short time with those on the ground. And after eating some corn, he flew away. Soon, however, he returned, this time remaining somewhat longer. The safety of the farm and this plentiful supply of food were so appealing that he lived among the domesticated birds. And he lived there all summer. When autumn came, he heard the cries of his former companions as they headed southward. He felt a strong desire to join them, but his added weight from eating so much caused him to settle back down. And then he stayed all winter. In the spring, he again heard the familiar call of his friends. His eyes gleamed and he began to flap his wings, but made no real effort to fly. That fall, the sound of the wild ducks only caused him to raise his head, and from then on, he paid no attention at all to his friends that were flying back and forth. If we ask and live for the things of this world, we just might get them. then we run the risk of forgetting who we are. That we are, in fact, children of God. You know, when my boss at Booz Allen, he said, "Do you want to be a senior associate?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Be careful what you wish for." The Israelites, they forgot all about all those things. And they let God begin to have the slop from their lives. Our faith should be in the God who created us, not in the creation itself, not in the things of this world. But if we ask for a life with God, we too can get that. If we place God first in our lives, in the center of our lives, we can live lives that are blessed